National Center for Education Statistics, in the fall of 2010, 95% of 6 to 21-year-old students with disabilities were served in regular schools, 3% were served in separate schools for students with disabilities, 1% were placed in regular private schools by their parents, and less than 1% were served or were placed in one of these facilities: separate residential facilities, homebound, or in a hospital, or even a correctional facility. So, how many of you know someone who has a disability? Alright, so for those that may not know what it is, well, a disability it's a term that's used to it's a term that limits and damages a person's physical or mental abilities. So according to education.gov, free appropriate public education for students with disabilities, also known as FAPE or FAP, allows all qualified persons with disabilities within the jurisdiction of the school district are entitled to a free appropriate public education. So unfortunately, not many of these students have the same privilege as all of us do. So many of them don't have the same privilege of going to a school where they have free appropriate education. So my credibility. Well, I know someone for 16 years who has autism, and autism is a condition that affects them forming relationships with others and communicating with others. So in his situation, he attended a high school where the teacher would have him in the class all day, and he wouldn't go outside, he wouldn't interact with other students, he was just there all day, and I didn't feel like that wasn't right. And and the issue is that he's kept in that classroom, not interacting with other students, so I didn't feel like it was right. So my thesis, hopefully by understanding that these students need to be out interacting with other students, not just disabled students, but they need to interact with non-disabled students. And first I'll be discussing that these students need exposures with non-disabled students, and that they need models for them to develop their social skills and the benefits of inclusion, which I'll discuss in a bit. So first, we'll discuss about exposure. So these students, they need exposure with non-disabled students, as I mentioned, and their perception on disabled students need to change. So according to Celia Baker, in an article published for National Deseret News, the parents of a daughter that has Down syndrome believes that children with disabilities benefit from attending school with everyone else, and their classmates will learn important lessons about empathy and acceptance. So not only that they develop these life lessons that they'll remember forever, but they also learn how to interact with each other, and that's the whole point. Because without this, how would they apply this to the real world once they're off of school? Once you graduate from school, they need to develop these skills so that they're able to encounter on a day-to-day basis. So now perception. According to Helen, I cannot pronounce her last name, so please forgive me, but in an article published for the Huffington Post, she quotes in her article, "People who are not exposed to individuals with disabilities often do not realize that a disabled person, despite his or her disability, is just like a non-disabled person. Everyone should ask themselves, what similarities and differences do I have with people who have disabilities?" In fact, this author had a learning disability where the people that she grew up with and her parents didn't accept her. So just because she had this disability. So and her message in her article is that she wanted people to accept for who they are and not what they lack. So, and according to Michelle Diamond, in an article published for the Disability Scoop, in a survey of 1,520 kids ages 7 to 16, researchers found that increased familiarity with those who have disabilities led to less anxiety and better attitudes. So I'm pretty sure it's straightforward. The more they see that student, the more they're comfortable with that student. So I discussed a little bit about exposure and perception, and I'll be moving on to that models. So these students, these disabled students, they need role models. As we all know, we have a role model that we all look up to. So for example, for me, I have a mother, my mother, she's my role model. So same thing with these students. They need a role model that they can look up to and accept them for who they are. And excuse me, sorry about that. So yeah, they need role models so that they can accept who they are. Not only that, but they develop their social skills. So according to Dennett Locke, in an article published of May 2012 for naturepathways.com, one-on-one behavior therapy between the child and the therapist is an important aspect treatment. Socialization with other children and adults, both with and without disabilities, can help children utilize the skills they learn in therapy and apply them to everyday situations they encounter. So, if you really think about it, if they don't interact with other students, how will they develop that skill of interacting with other people once they graduate from high school? How will they talk to other people? How will they encounter on a day-to-day basis with other people? How will they develop that skill if they don't do this? So, so I discussed a little bit about the role models and the social skills that they need. Now I'll be moving on to inclusions. So what is inclusion and why is it beneficial for these disabled students? Well, what is inclusion? According to Jerry Webster in an article published for abouteducation.com, inclusion is an educational practice of educating children with disabilities in classrooms with children without disabilities. Inclusion was established by the free and appropriate public education, as I mentioned earlier, and the least restrictive environment. So, as I said, without this, how will these students develop their growth and apply it to the real world once they graduate high school and develop the growth? And what are the benefits that they receive? Well, according to Wesley Sharp in an article published for educationalworld.com, inclusion improves learning for both non- and disabled students. Children learn to accept individual differences, develop new friendships, improve parents' participation, and the civil rights. So I think the issue here is that not a lot of people know that their kid that's disabled, they're not really interacting with others. Some of them are just kept in the classroom all day, and that's that isn't right. Okay, so now that I talked about a little bit of inclusion, now let's wrap things up. So, sorry about that. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that everyone here is trying to get the best learning experience from school, right? So, why is it that we do, but then not these students, the disabled students? So they should have the same privilege as well. So, them being being in the classroom all day just with disabled students, I don't think that's the right thing. But I think they need to get out there. And so I discussed a little bit about my main points. I discussed about the exposures, the role models that they need, the social skills they develop, and inclusion. So I mentioned earlier that that person that I know for 16 years has autism. Turns out to be my little brother. He attended a high school. Well, he's not there anymore, but he attended a high school where they kept him in the classroom all day, and the only time that he would be out was during lunch or he needed to use the restroom. And we noticed that when he comes home, we didn't see any skills that he applied, or we didn't see any improvement in him. So we thought about getting him out of that high school and going to another one. And this high school actually, he's only been there for a couple of weeks, and we saw so much improvement in him. And why? Because he's interacting with other students. He's going out to regular classrooms, participating. Even though he may have trouble communicating with others, but that's fine, as long as he's interacting with other people. And I remember the teacher told me, sometimes the students will go pick him up during lunch and just want to play basketball with him, and that's fine, as long as they develop his skill. And, I'm just trying to say, the whole main point is that, these students need to get out of these classrooms and interact with other people.